Con Stathopoulos and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible podcast, Grow, Scale, Master.
An energetic approach to drive progress, master skills, build strengths and put the strategy back into rapid business and personal success.
Backed by real-world experience in rapid scaling to playing the long-term game of business, it's the story of all the lessons learned on the journey to mastery.
Be inspired, renew your energy and chase the future with Grow, Scale, Master.
Con, one of the things that I look at is that we have an updates channel in our Slack. And what that is that any time that anyone in my team sees that someone has left the real estate industry or changed an organisation, moved brand or opened an office or rebranded or done anything like that, it goes in so that more broadly everyone in the team is aware that that's actually happened. And it's interesting because I think that in the period that we've just been through, it's probably the lowest amount of turnover that we've seen in quite some time.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of agents maybe had a really good October, November, December. Many that are tuned in have also got a lot of listings listed for January, February already. Yep. They're in momentum, they're kind of making that thing happen. But I also go to think about the power of retention is really understanding how you go to build loyalty in people. And I think that loyalty definitely exists.
It does.
But the difference is that loyalty is earned constantly as opposed to just given.
Correct.
Right? And I think that you got to have a bit of a master list. And you have been in some sessions with me where we've worked on this to say, give me examples why people leave. Financial splits, office politics, cultural issues, distribution of leads, the director's a listing principal, the director's not a listing principal, they're not a director, they are a director, they're not a partner, they are a partner.
Lack of energy in the business, lack of investment,
lack of market share,
lack of visibility from leadership, no coaching, no training.
Yeah. So when you start to think about that, is the opposite of that just why people stay?
Yeah, partly. I think, it's a really good question. And I actually think anyone that's in business or running sales teams or property management teams in a leadership role needs to really think about that.
Yeah.
So for me, whenever someone leaves our business in any role, it's a very much a deep inward focus for us to look at what we could have done better. Now, sometimes it's just people want to go on a different path, which is fine, right?
Yeah.
But I think loyalty to an individual or a brand is one thing.
Yeah.
You said it earlier. You got to earn that every single day.
Yes.
But I think the reason why people stay and why the people leave is that we as leaders don't understand what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, sure.
And then they kind of lose faith that maybe this is not...
Maybe they're not even clear on what they could achieve
correct.
either.
That's exactly right. So sometimes, there's a saying, the grass is greener on the other side. Well, my big belief is the grass is greener where you water it.
Yes.
That might be with us or it might be somewhere else.
Yes.
But I think really it's got to be a focus about how do we bring joy and delight and how do we wow our people internally and externally?
Yes.
And how do we help everyone get to where they want to get to?
Yes.
For us, our vision is to create the best place for people to change their lives.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we have to live by that to be able to enable that to happen.
Yeah.
And if we're not, then we need to look at it, what it could be. Sometimes, we get a little bit busy. Sometimes we lose focus. Sometimes people get lost. Some people, we miss out those little moments where they might have a bit of a dark cloud over their heads because of what's happening at home, whatever. But I think there's a combination of why people stay and there's a combination of why people leave, absolutely.
And I think a lot of it in that retention has got to do about having a very intentional, defined culture.
100%.
And so literally a lot of people will talk about culture, but they can't define it. So we are working on a project together and at the moment it's hey, do you like opens or yes or no? Are you auctions, yes or no? Private appointments, yes or no?
Yeah.
Price guides, yes or no, depending on if that's allowed in your state, territory, or country. But you start to get a series of preferences around the transactional components. And then is the property allowed to be on off market for longer than 7 days? No. So it must go to market. So they're all examples of cultural pieces. But also too really understanding that inside the organisation, know everyone's name. Be in a position that we turn up on time, meetings start on time regardless if people are there. All of that sort of stuff is a really important thing. Then I think that a lot of organisations don't have it written down anywhere. So therefore it's really hard to replicate it. And outside of the induction session, where do I read that? If there was a one-pager culture thing that you just needed to know about McGrath more broadly, what is it? So that then I can understand that, because there's a lot of assumptions that I'm going to somehow pick it up or know it because I've got the label on today, but I don't necessarily know what that means.
Yeah, I think as well, I've just been, as you've been talking, I've just been thinking, I think as well, a lot of people, particularly in a leadership position, sometimes are afraid to have a real open and honest and direct conversation. hey, Josh, it kind of feels like things are a little bit off track at the moment with me and you or with us.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that, because you're a really important part of our business, and I made a commitment to you when you first joined us that we're going to help you create the best place for you to change your life.
Yes.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And I think strong leaders will walk into those conversations openly to be able to become better.
Yes.
Because if you don't address it, you don't nip it in the bud, what tends to happen is it either accumulates over time and it kind of, spreads, and the toxicity within the individual, not that it spreads out to other people, but it just kind of builds, and then they go and meet someone who's a breath of fresh air, and it kind of does feel like the grass is greener on the other side. I think we need to run towards culture.
Yeah.
We need to run towards potential inadequacies in our business, where it might be process, it might be people, it might be technology, it might be whatever it might be. I really don't think people come or go for the split.
Yes.
And I might be delusional, but I'm a big believer people will join you because of what you can offer them that they currently can't get from where they're at. If they come for a deal, they're probably going to leave for a deal. Okay, and I know we've got over 200 staff members now in our team, and we don't do deals, and I don't think anyone's ever left us because they could get an extra 5% or 10% or $5,000 somewhere else. I think what we provide as value is much more. It's worth more than that, if that makes sense.
Is it also harder, or unless it's very intentional, that the stages of the business growth, so you often will hear people go, back when it was small,
Yeah, we've heard it, 100%. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. When we were at Parramatta and we had 13, 14 people, I could be very hands-on. I was at, basically most vendor meetings, listing appointments, market appraisals, price adjustments. I'm doing stock reviews. Things change. The business has scaled now. So that means that I can't do what I used to do 5.5 years ago, but I can do something better.
Yes.
And I've got people in there that I've handpicked and I've trained and coached to be able to offer.
And there's the pinpoint, because your 7 direct reports is everything. Because those people are a pure reflection of you in market.
That's exactly right. And I think, 2026, I think we're going to see more complexity and friction in 2026 than we've ever experienced. And I'm not even talking about the pathway to professionalism. I'm talking about price transparency legislation and AML.
Yes.
These are 2 massive changes coming up.
Yes. Yeah.
And what we've got to be careful of, and I'm talking to you and I'm thinking about this in our business. We do 2,500 sales a year.
Yeah.
Think about the impact that's going to have when it comes to even producing an agency agreement or, getting CMAs and that type of stuff. We've got to be really careful that we don't forget who the customer is and who the client is.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other key component in here is that being okay that we don't yet have the answers.
Yes.
So when the day that the answers do come, we'll have a full briefing and a 1-page briefing sheet.
That's exactly right.
And so as an example, in New South Wales, we could be facing statement of information.
Correct.
In Victoria, we could be facing the publication of an auction reserve 7 days prior.
That's exactly right.
And then we've definitely have further details from Austrac about AML.
Correct.
And reporting suspicious activity.
Spot on.
And then also too, in addition to that, the Privacy Commissioner is now coming for the real estate industry to make sure how we're retaining records.
Correct.
And I can guarantee you that if I rang 10 people and said, hey, just give me top 5 things that you need to do from a privacy.
It's not on
Most of us are going to the privacy policy page on our website.
Correct.
But not necessarily understanding what that means in terms of our commitment to data, opting in.
Then think about that. And then throw all the other complexity that we've got. There's 200 steps to a transaction completing, right? Properly. So when you talk about retention and you talk about why people leave and why people go,
yes,
is as leaders we have to think about these things before they're happening. My mind's already in June.
Yes,
this first quarter's done. When I say done, it's not done. It's done in terms of our planning.
Yes,
really, what I'm concerned about now is April, May, and June quarter. Why? Because we've got school holidays and Easter, and we've also got Anzac Day in that April. Come end of June, we're heading into winter. We've got in May, I think it's March or April or May, we've got the price transparency legislation. 1st of July is AML.
Yeah.
Quarter 4, that's going to be a tight one. So how do we actually transfer? Now, if we're not thinking about this, then our team aren't getting the benefit. What's happening is we're chasing our tail, therefore we're creating a really poor internal customer experience.
Mm-hmm. And so you're going to need to be at the forefront of having a bit of an execution team on this about who's our AML team in terms of service providers, but also too internally, who's our champions in every single office, how does that lay out? Let's go and have that conversation.
Exactly right.
And then also too, going to our best, and whether or not it's a podcast, whether or not it's a webinar, or whether or not it's actually an in-person live event, but doing something.
Yes.
Say, guys, we've got to get around this. Here's the legislation. This is what it means. This is what we see in terms of practical application. And running a workshop to find the best way to deliver that at speed, to minimize any bruising, ensure compliance, but most importantly, also deliver great customer experiences for both internal and external customers, regardless of the changes.
Now, take exactly what you just said and apply that to every part of your business.
Mm-hmm.
Business planning, coaching, one-on-ones. That's exactly what you need to do, right? That's the formula.
So one of the conversations around the retention special is just to think that, what do you do next? And I always just think, okay, great, I got to spare 5 minutes, 20 minutes in the car. Who could I ring?
Spot on.
What could I say?
Yeah.
I could have a better quality conversation. Because what everyone's missed, I think, is that the hardest thing to replicate is depth of relationship.
I agree.
So
completely
build it,
agree.
Be a person.
Yeah, correct. I totally agree.
Experiences that rapidly shaped you.
Con, I think that, Beyond Entrepreneurship, the original, because there's now 2.0 that came out by Jim Collins, and actually back then it was James C. Collins. He had this chapter that or even a couple of pages, and it was about common enemy or role model approach.
Yes.
And I know we've spoken about it before, but it really did shift my thinking, because the basic idea is that I think it was Nike and Reebok were going head to head. Do you remember, I'm a Mac and I'm a PC?
Yeah.
That was actually, Apple was actually running that as a strategy at one point. And it is unbelievable. And we ran that strategy for a couple of clients, and one here even in Balmain, and they'd chosen a competitor and they wanted to get rid of them. And I remember the day that literally that competitor sold. And I remember the business owner turning to me and going, what do we do now? And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, well, we achieved the mission. We didn't actually expect to not have them in business, but we actually are in a position they're not in business now. And it's a really interesting thing that I learned very quickly, that common enemy can be incredibly powerful. It can be an amazing driver of momentum. But there's a point where you move and maybe it's a different strategy where you say, how do I become a role model? How do I become the best in the world at what I do? And how do I learn to compete with myself and to be driven by that?
Yeah. And
you got to find what drives you in different markets and market share. It might be different things, but I always just say, okay, great. I don't really want to go down the track of common enemy. For me, my chosen strategy is to actually, how do I become role model, in the best at what I do? And that means I'm on a constant learning, a journey of growth and discovery and desire to really push harder and make things better.
Yeah, we spoke about wow moments, right? And how do we create those experiences? I really recommend, if everyone hasn't, Will Guidara. Just
Unreasonable Hospitality.
Yeah, read the book, get on the podcast, look at YouTube videos. There's so much content out there.
Yeah.
Just in terms of creating those little micro moments that can really make the biggest impact.
Yeah.
And I look at our transaction cycle on how we meet people, the intersection of, relationship, communication, touch points. Sometimes when you're off track, you can turn it around and make it on track.
Yes.
We had a really recent experience over the break. We had an agent that left our business that left a little bit of a mess with some vendors and some purchases. And, from a complaint, we managed to be able to turn them into raving fans. And I think it is a really good eye-opening experience to be able to look at something like what Will's put together and just think about, how do I just make that extra little bit special?
Something that's changing your view.
So, Con, I was reading this story where this guy literally gets a table, right? And he puts 4 people around it. And then on the table, they put out a series of red chips, blue chips, and white chips. And the white chips are in the center, and then the blue are then the next one, and then the red and the next one. And you can only pick up one chip at a time, and you have to then put them into a bag. And it's a competition to see how quickly you can do it.
Gotcha. Okay.
But you've only got 20 seconds to do it.
Wow.
Okay, so and now there's a plethora of red chips, there's a smaller number of blue chips, and in the center there's only a few of the white. Anyway, so they run the experiment and they go and do it. And what do most people do? Well, they go for the nearest ones because it's the quickest and that's how you're going to get the most. So their brain goes red, more. And then he then says, okay, great. So now we're going to stop the experiment and now I'm going to tell you it. the white chips are worth 1,000.
Yeah.
The blue chips are worth like 100, and the red chips are worth a cent.
Yeah.
Would that now change?
Yes, of course it would.
Your perspective. Okay, great. Now swap that into what's important in your life.
I like that. Yeah, that's cool.
So I'm quick to just, I got the new iPhone and I got the new AirPods and I got this and I got that. But have I had a great relationship with my mum, or did I build a great relationship with my partner, or have I spent the time with my kids, or and if I really think about the moments that are actually important, how is that then reflected into what's going on?
Yeah, that's
in your calendar?
a cracker. That's good. I like that a lot.